I'm going to demonstrate how I did the rendering for a bottle 3, this carafe bottle. For the last tutorial, we had set up this perspective. So we are ready to go with our point of view. We have our 8.5 by 11 size, display image size set up. And we have the perspective ready to go. So if you remember, we set up the lights. We had those 3 lights that we had set up earlier. I actually added a 4th. So I'm going to talk about this process of adjusting lights and selecting materials. So the body of the bottle is just going to be white. So it'll be an opaque, like a polyethylene, with a little bit of a shine to it. I think I made it a little bit shinier than traditional polyethylene, which is kind of a flat surface. And then I'll have the green closure, which is also a plastic part. And then the label, which is kind of just a mock label that we had put on earlier. So we have this all set, and I have turned on my lights. I mean, not turned them on, I made it so we can see them, those arrow heads that we have. So I'm going to go, let's see, view, let's go to front view. And if I back up a little, I see my little arrows. These were all my lights. If you remember correctly, we started off setting up 3 of them. You go to the top view. So we had that one in the back over here. I refer to that as the backlighting. So that's going to sort of illuminate this right side that we're partially seeing. And then the one on the left here is more of the frontal lighting. And then we have this one here. It's almost straight up, is usually our brightest light, and that shines down from the top. And I added a 4th one here so I could illuminate that edge by the label. This took some time. I started the tutorial by not setting these lights up, and it was taking forever. So I stopped that one. I'm going to do it over. I'm going to explain what I did without actually going through the whole process, because it does take some time. So this requires some patience. You're moving these arrows around all over the place and re-rendering constantly. So one part of this is moving these lights and getting those into position. The other part is dealing with the materials. So up in our materials area, I eliminated a lot of those other cubes that I'm not using, and I just kept some of the parts that I am working with here. So color-wise, I am just using a white and the green. And then I have our label that I adjusted the reflectivity of that also. So in combination of moving these lights, if you double click on the color of your object, in my case, it's this white area, and I have it under plastic. And each one of these, there's a whole series of different options we can have. So here we have ambient reflection, diffuse reflection, specular. I still don't understand exactly what these are doing. I just know if I move them around, things happen. It gets less shiny, it gets more shiny, it gets whiter, it gets darker. It's a whole series of different things going on. So one thing I do remember, the specular reflection here is what makes those highlights very white. So I kind of back off on that sometimes so it isn't so white. And then we have glow, which sort of, if you put a little glow on it, just kind of brightens up the whole object a little bit. It's hard to explain exactly what's going to happen with these. You have to experiment. So you build your object, pick a color, make your object the color, and then experiment with these. Now, this is just plastic. The whole series of other things we can do. Roughness, quite often the default is at 0. But the higher that roughness, the shinier the part comes. So you get this level of contrast, which is a bit more intense. It brightens up parts and also makes other parts dark that are in shadow. So you got to experiment with all of these. In this case, I worked with this white, and then I also did the green. I think I actually used the same reflecting quality, plastic. 30, I think I actually made it a little shinier and brighten it up a little bit. So these are very similar attributes that I used for that part. And then the label also has reflective qualities too, even though it's just a 2D image. I think I adjusted this independently. Nothing really happened much with this. It's pretty flat surface. I just wanted to be nice and clear on the rendering, so I didn't put too much effort into adjusting that. So by working with that and moving these lights around, see them all in positions, it takes some time. So please be patient. So we have our view. When I do this rendering, quite often I'll bring my view up because it's a lot of back and forth. So if we click on the view, and I'm going to do render zone. So this looks pretty good. It looks a little gray. Like I had mentioned, white can be challenging. White is white. If you put a highline on it, how much whiter can you make it? So you kind of have to have some darker gray areas so your whites will look white. It's very hard to do white. So I thought this was pretty good. It got very close to where I wanted to do it. So you see I have this little shadow and I have this little reflection on the bottom. I actually built a little floor there and put that reflection on there. So I'll show you how I did that. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But you can see the lighting. So I'm trying to show this rib pattern that feathers down to 0 at the neck. I got a little bit of a highlight by this label area here. So that was that extra 4th light I added. I put that, shine that right on that corner coming in from the right. Then you can see I got a nice backlighting glow. It's pretty bright at the bottom and it transcends all the way up the side there. So that looks pretty nice. And then I got this other hot highlight over on the left here at the bottom, which gave us this nice little dark area in the front. That just makes it a little bit more interesting. So it isn't all flat, it's completely arbitrary. So I have one of my lights shining up down there. I might even have a 5th light. No, maybe not. So I think that little detail looks quite nice. So these are all very arbitrary decisions that you have to do. Like I have a plastic reflection on the closure and I made that pretty bright. So that kind of lightens it up so it's not too heavy looking. So it's a matter of moving those lights around and working with your materials. So this little floor I have on the bottom, this little counter area, is actually a piece of geometry. It's just a flat 2-dimensional circle. But what's key is I set up this cube here, this material. So if you go under reflection and you select the word called catcher, this isn't really an object. What it does is it disappears except for receiving shadows and reflections. So it's designed to do essentially what I'm doing with this. So you can control the shadow intensity. So if I go way up to 100, I have a really, really dark shadow. And reflectivity, I'm just using just a little bit. I don't want it to be like a complete mirror. If you go all the way to 100%, it'll be like a mirror. You will see 100%. I kind of want it light, just a little suggestive area of a reflection. It just sort of sets the bottle in a little bit of an environment without overdoing it. It's very subtle. When I render this, I quite often bring it into Photoshop and I feather it out and just kind of soften it so it starts to go away. So it's just there in a very subtle fashion. You can play with that and experiment what those things look like. But it's catcher with those 2 adjustments. So all I did was I just drew a flat circle here. And it doesn't have to be a circle, it can be a square, it can be anything you want. And I just put it under the bottle. Sometimes I will move it slightly lower than the front of that bottle. Let's see if I did that. I don't necessarily want the touch, so if it catches a little bit of a shadow, so I have it slightly down. I just like to do that in case, you know, if I have my shadows on, I can get like a nice little dark shadow under there. But that's, again, that's completely arbitrary. So go back to my perspective. And that's the rendering I had set up. So I did do most of the renderings I do. So you can have a little bit of shadow here and a slight reflection, which I'll feather out later. I used to put like dark backgrounds and gradiated things and a whole series of different kind of backgrounds when I was younger, but that kind of got in the way after a while. So I've been keeping it very clean. I'm trying to show my object, just the object, so I don't have any of these other unnecessary things in the way. So I don't use a lot of backgrounds anymore because it's very easy to crop this now. You can crop this down. I can put it on a page with other pictures or other renderings, and I don't have to worry about any kind of backgrounds. So that's just what I do, but we can put backgrounds on this. So I have this in render zone. So if you go under display, each one of these rendering and gray visualization techniques has options. So if you go under display options, they're all here, and I'm on render zone. So if you click on render zone, I can do these things. I can do things with shading, with global illumination. There are some adjustments that can be made. A lot of those I use in environments, not so much on small objects. How geometry is shown. And here's this one, scene. So right now it's under project color. So project color is whatever we have decided. Now my project color is white. So I have that under white. But one that's very helpful is gradient. So that would be like a graduated background from one color to another. I set this on, I mean, this slider is sideways, but it shows you over here which orientation you are. And you can change that. You can do it straight, you can do it at an angle, you can do several things with how that's oriented. So it's horizontal, so I'm going to bring a dark, a medium gray from the top down to white, and my bottle will sit in that environment. And you can slide this around and move where you want that, and you can pick the colors. I picked gray, and then the bottom of the slider is white, so you can select those colors. I think this looks pretty good. Now I think I can go right to automatic rendering. And there it is. So that just gives this, especially with a light object that's white, it gives you that little bit of gray behind there. And it looks like it's shot in a professional photo studio, like on a seamless piece of background. This is what I was trying to show you guys when you're taking pictures of your foam core models, is to show this in its best light. So that looks very nice. It's just when I start to crop these out and put them with other things, I have this background that I have to deal with. Now I can make that any color I want. I can make the bottom any color I want. There's options where we can bring in pictures. You can bring a JPEG image of an environment, like a kitchen and things like that. And you can map that right in behind this object and render it right in that environment in Form Z. I know a lot of you cut it out in Photoshop and then you drop it into a JPEG picture. That's perfectly fine. Both of those things work, but a lot of that you can do right here in Form Z. Okay, so that's the starting point for the rendering. So I said this is a very simple part. There's no clear plastics or heavy reflections. It's just white. And I'm trying to show this in its best point of view. So it's a matter of moving those lights around and getting them into position and then working on your reflective qualities of your materials. All right, I'll do another tutorial of this on a clear PET plastic part with the juice on the inside. That gets a little bit more complicated. Similar lighting technique, but we have to do some more building to make that work. So I'll do that in the next tutorial.